In the rugged heart of Afghanistan, between towering mountains and narrow valleys, there lies a region called Ghor, a place once isolated from the great empires of the world. For centuries, its people lived in their own rhythm, shepherds, traders, warriors, unknown to the rest of the world. Yet, from this remote and harsh land would rise a dynasty that would reshape the destiny of the Indian subcontinent forever. They were the Ghurids, and their most famous ruler, Muhammad of Ghor, would open the gates of northern India to a new era, an era of sultanates, empires, and a lasting Indo-Islamic civilization. To understand the Ghurids, we must first understand the world they came from. The mountains of Ghor lay between two great regions, Khorasan to the west and Ghazni to the east. For centuries, the area had been fought over by larger powers. The Samanids, the Ghaznavids, and even local tribal chiefs had all tried to control it, but Ghor remained fiercely independent. The people were hardy, proud, and shaped by the unforgiving terrain. They were mountain warriors, strong, disciplined, and ambitious. The early history of Ghor is shadowy. For a long time, it was ruled by local chiefs who often converted between different faiths depending on who held power nearby. Some sources suggest that the early Ghurids were Buddhist or pagan before gradually embracing Islam under the influence of neighboring dynasties. By the 12th century, they had become firm Muslims, followers of Sunni Islam, but retained their tribal independence and warrior traditions. It was during this time that the Ghaznavid Empire, once mighty under Mahmud of Ghazni, began to weaken. The Ghaznavids had been the masters of eastern Afghanistan and northern India for over a century. They ruled from their glittering capital in Ghazni and later from Lahore, but by the mid-12th century, their power had crumbled. Their territories were shrinking, their armies demoralized, and their court riddled with intrigue. The rising Seljuks in the west and the restless mountain tribes in the east pressed against them from all sides. Among those mountain tribes were the Ghurids. Their leader at the time was Alauddin Hussein, a man remembered in history for his revenge. Around 1151 CE, he launched an attack on Ghazni to avenge the execution of his kinsmen by the Ghaznavids. His army swept through the city with fury. Ghazni, once the shining jewel of Central Asia, was burned for 7 days. Its libraries, palaces, and gardens were destroyed. Alauddin Hussein became known as Jahansoz, the world burner. It was a moment of vengeance, but also a turning point. The Ghaznavids never recovered. The balance of power in the region shifted permanently toward Ghor. From this destruction emerged a new generation of Ghurid rulers, more strategic, more visionary. Among them were two brothers who would change history: Ghiyasuddin Muhammad and Muizzuddin Muhammad, better known as Muhammad of Ghor. They were men of ambition and intelligence, and together they laid the foundation for a new empire. Ghiyasuddin focused on strengthening Ghurid power in Afghanistan and Iran. He expanded westward into Khorasan and Herat, bringing stability and wealth to the highlands. Meanwhile, his brother Muhammad looked eastward toward India. The brothers understood that the future of their dynasty lay not in the war-torn west, but in the fertile and prosperous lands beyond the Indus. When Muhammad of Ghor began his campaigns, the political landscape of northern India was fragmented. The great empires of the past, the Palas, the Pratiharas, and the Rashtrakutas, had faded. In their place stood many smaller kingdoms, each strong in its own right, but divided by rivalry and pride. In the northwest, the Ghaznavid remnants still clung to power in Lahore. Beyond them lay the Punjab, ruled by local chiefs. Farther east, in Delhi and Ajmer, stood the Rajputs, proud warriors who followed codes of honor and kinship. Among them, the most powerful was Prithviraj Chauhan, the ruler of Delhi and Ajmer. When Muhammad of Ghor looked at this map, he saw opportunity, but his first campaigns into India did not go as planned. Around 1175 CE, he attacked Multan and Uch, seizing them from Ismaili rulers. From there, he moved toward Gujarat, hoping to capture the wealthy temple city of Anhilwara. But there, the local Solanki forces defeated him. It was a harsh lesson. The Indian plains were unlike the mountain passes of Ghor. The armies here were larger, the climate harsher, and the terrain unfamiliar. However, Muhammad was not a man to be easily discouraged. He learned from every setback. In the years that followed, he focused on building a stronger base. He consolidated his power in Sindh and Punjab, capturing Peshawar and Lahore, the old Ghaznavid strongholds. By taking Lahore, he effectively ended the Ghaznavid dynasty's rule in India. The city that had once belonged to Mahmud of Ghazni now belonged to the Ghurids. From this new base, Muhammad planned his next great move, the conquest of the Rajput heartland. The stage was set for one of the most famous confrontations in medieval Indian history, the battles between Muhammad of Ghor and Prithviraj Chauhan. In 1191 CE, Muhammad led his army across the Punjab to the frontier town of Tarain near present-day Haryana. There, he faced the combined forces of the Rajputs under Prithviraj. Contemporary accounts describe a massive battle, elephants, cavalry, and archers clashing in clouds of dust. Muhammad's forces fought bravely, but the Rajputs held firm. During the chaos, Muhammad was wounded by an arrow and forced to retreat. The victory went to Prithviraj Chauhan. It was a moment of triumph for the Rajputs, but Muhammad of Ghor was not finished. He returned the following year, better prepared. In 1192, he marched once again to Tarain. This time, his army was disciplined and strategically organized. Instead of relying solely on direct combat, he used tactics learned from Central Asian warfare: mobility, deception, and endurance. When the two armies met again, the outcome was different. The Rajputs, brave as always, charged with their elephants and cavalry, but Muhammad's mounted archers outmaneuvered them, striking from a distance and breaking their formations. Gradually, the Rajput line began to falter. When the dust settled, the field of Tarain was covered with the fallen. Prithviraj Chauhan's army was defeated, and northern India lay open. This victory was one of the turning points in Indian history. The defeat at Tarain in 1192 marked the end of Rajput dominance in the north and the beginning of Islamic rule that would eventually evolve into the Delhi Sultanate. Muhammad of Ghor did not stop there. He sent his trusted general Qutbuddin Aibak to secure the newly conquered territories. Together, they advanced toward Delhi and Ajmer, capturing both. The heart of northern India was now under Ghurid control. Muhammad's genius lay not only in conquest, but in administration. He understood that ruling India required more than force. After his victories, he appointed governors, many of them his loyal Turkish slaves, to maintain order. Among them was Qutbuddin Aibak, who proved himself an able commander and administrator. Aibak governed from Delhi, overseeing the consolidation of Ghurid power and the construction of mosques, fortresses, and new centers of governance. Meanwhile, Muhammad returned to his homeland to manage affairs in Afghanistan and Central Asia. His empire now stretched from the borders of Iran to the Ganges River, a vast territory that linked the highlands of Ghor with the rich plains of India. But such an empire was difficult to hold together. It required constant vigilance. Even as Muhammad celebrated his victories in India, he faced threats on other fronts. In the West, rival Muslim powers challenged his authority. In the north, rebellious tribes sought independence. Yet despite these pressures, he continued to balance his twin responsibilities: to expand Islam's frontiers and to strengthen the foundations of governance. One of the remarkable aspects of Muhammad of Ghor's rule was his reliance on merit over birth. Like the earlier Ghaznavids, he had risen through determination rather than noble lineage. He valued loyalty and skill above aristocratic blood. Many of his generals, administrators, and governors were former slaves who had proven themselves in service. This system of military slaves, or Mamluks, became the backbone of his empire. It was this very system that ensured his legacy long after his death. Among those trained under him were men who would later found the Delhi Sultanate, Qutbuddin Aibak, Iltutmish, and others. The institutions they inherited and the territories they governed all trace back to Muhammad of Ghor's conquests. But his own life came to an abrupt end. In 1206 CE, while returning from India to his capital in Ghazni, Muhammad was assassinated. Accounts differ on who was responsible. Some blame the Khokhars, fierce tribesmen of the Punjab who had long resisted his rule. Others suggest political rivals. Whatever the case, his death marked the end of the Ghurid dynasty's expansion. Without his strong leadership, the empire soon fragmented. His territories in India came under the control of his former slave, Qutbuddin Aibak, who would go on to establish the Delhi Sultanate, the first lasting Muslim dynasty in India. In this sense, Muhammad of Ghor's death was not an end but a beginning. His campaigns had permanently altered the political map of northern India. Before him, invasions from the northwest had come and gone. Armies would raid, plunder, and retreat. But Muhammad of Ghor's conquest was different. He built structures of governance. He left behind an organized system, a network of governors, and a foundation for future rule. He also changed the course of cultural history. The Ghurid period marked the arrival of Persian as the language of administration and high culture in India. It marked the rise of new architectural styles, early forms of Indo-Islamic design that blended Central Asian arches with Indian craftsmanship. It marked the beginning of an exchange between two civilizations, the Islamic world and the ancient Indian world, that would continue to shape the subcontinent for centuries. The Ghurids themselves did not last long as a dynasty. After Muhammad's death, their lands in Afghanistan and Khorasan were gradually taken over by the Khwarezmians and later the Mongols. Ghazni and Ghor lost their former glory, becoming quiet ruins of history. But their legacy lived on in India, through the sultanates that followed, through the architecture they inspired, and through the administrative traditions they established. When we think of the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughal Empire that came after it, we can trace a clear line back to Muhammad of Ghor. He was the bridge between two worlds, the mountain empires of Central Asia and the fertile plains of India. His vision, discipline, and reforms ensured that his conquests would not fade like those before him. And perhaps this is why history remembers him not just as a conqueror, but as a founder, not of monuments or dynasties that bore his name, but of an enduring political and cultural order. If we look at the course of Indian history after his time, we can see his influence everywhere. The establishment of Delhi as a capital, the rise of Persian as the language of culture, the growth of Indo-Islamic art, architecture, and literature, all these seeds were sown during the Ghurid period. His life is a study in determination. Born in the harsh mountains of Ghor with few resources, he rose through vision and willpower. He faced defeat and learned from it. He built alliances and institutions that outlived him. His story reminds us that history is not only made by empires of gold and marble, but by those who can see potential where others see only obstacles. The Ghurids may have ruled for only a brief period in the grand timeline of history, but their impact was far greater than their years suggest. They turned the tides of politics, faith, and culture. They connected Central Asia and India in a way that neither could ever fully separate again. And so the story of Muhammad of Ghor is not just about conquest, it is about transformation. It is about how one man's ambition reshaped an entire region's destiny. From the quiet valleys of Ghor to the crowded bazaars of Delhi, his influence echoed for centuries. As we look back on his legacy, we can ask ourselves, what truly changes history? Is it the sword that conquers or the vision that endures long after the sword is gone? Is greatness measured by how much land a man can take or by how deeply he can alter the path of civilizations? Muhammad of Ghor's answer lies not in the ruins of his capital, but in the cities that still stand, Delhi, Lahore, Ajmer, places where his vision took root. His empire vanished, but his influence remains woven into the story of India itself. And that is why the Ghurids and the man who led them will forever be remembered as the dynasty that changed Indian history forever.